Hey, everybody, and welcome to the April 2023 edition of Parting the Veil. Tonight, we're going to be talking about mastery. This is one I think we've been really excited to talk about. Got a lot of great questions from the community. Before we begin, as always, I'd like to introduce our creative director, Chris Joppa Perkins, who always does this show beside me. So, Chris, thank you once again for putting up with me and answering some amazing questions from our community.
Absolutely. It's an exciting topic. I've been pretty excited to dig into this one.
Yeah, and I was really excited when we were kind of brainstorming what was next. We're like, how about this? Yes, please. You didn't have to convince me much on talking about this topic. So before we begin, I do want to make sure everybody's aware, if you haven't listened to or viewed a Parting of the Veil before, it's kind of like a live podcast. You can actually download this on your favorite podcast apps after we're done. Just search for Pantheon Development and you'll see the different things we put on there. And just keep in mind that this show is really about discussing our systems. You know, we do our live stream every month, and that's going to be like your visual thing. But this is really a deep dig into what makes Pantheon Pantheon and talking into some of our design documents, something you may not see a bunch in other developments of games that we kind of have a unique spin on getting to sit with Chris here. So I think that sums it up, Chris. Are you ready to go? Do you want to jump right into this one?
I mean, I don't know where else we'd go. Just sit here and
we just
take some sips.
Yeah, we just talk about other things. We can interact with the chat a little bit. No, okay. Let's jump right in. So let's start very basic. Chris, if you could give a very high level overview, we got a lot of questions to get into. I don't want to get ahead of the goal of what we are calling the mastery system for Pantheon.
So the best way to think about mastery is essentially a form of alternate advancement or secondary advancement. And what it is it's a companion system that companion meaning it's with you from the start. And as you progress through the game, as you level up, as you gain experience, complete quests, that whole time you are contributing to this pool of experience called mastery. And we'll get into some of the details of that here in a bit. But essentially, the idea is that as you are taking your character on this progression journey, that you would have many opportunities along the way to make some decisions about how you upgrade and how you modify certain aspects of your character, certain aspects of your character's abilities. Thematically, the way I like to think about it is unlocking your full potential. That's always kind of resonated with me. As you level up, you're getting stronger and you're getting access to new abilities and things like that. But these abilities you're using all the time. This character is living and breathing and existing and operating in this world all the time. And so the sense of mastery, the sense of like over time I'm unlocking my full potential in these areas of my class is really intriguing to me. And so that's what the mastery system is meant to express, is it's a means of opening up deeper levels of your potential by updating and evolving and kind of strengthening or changing some of the aspects about what your abilities can do as you master them, and what your character is capable of doing as you master your character in a sense.
Okay, good high level overview, and don't worry, we're going to go very in depth today. So before we get into the mastery feature itself and start breaking it down, you just mentioned like an experience pool, but I believe last we talked about mastery. There's a few different ways players will be able to achieve mastery points. So can you give a rundown of how somebody who on their character in Pantheon will experience gaining mastery points?
Yep. So there are currently 4 ways for you to gain mastery points. And I say currently because the system, I'm jumping ahead to a question coming up later, but
oh boy.
It is in now. It will be a part of the upcoming test in May. It's the most recent system since the refactor we did some years ago. The most recent system that we've brought back in, that has kind of gone offline for a little while since that refactor. But right now, you will gain mastery points in 4 ways. The first way is every time you level up. So the first mastery point you'll get is when you ding level 2, and then you'll get a mastery point every time you ding from then on out. The second way is when you open the inventory, you see your adventuring experience bar, but then underneath that, there's a second bar that is for your mastery experience. And every time there is an experience event, an experience gain event, whether that's through killing a mob, solo, whether that's through getting experience when your group kills a mob, whether that's completing a quest, whether that's exploring an area and getting experience for finding a new area. Whenever there is an experience gain event, you are going to receive an amount of mastery experience, and that amount is flat. And I'll even just lay out, kind of the math, because it's very simple right now. It's literally your mastery bar is a bar of potential 100 mastery experience points, and you get 1 mastery experience every time there is an experience event. So you'd need to kill, at this stage right now, you'd need to kill 100 NPCs to fill your bar up for the first time and get that first point. But again, every experience event is contributing that single point. And the idea there is that we want, and that's, these are numbers that will be tweaked as we move along and whatnot. But the idea is that it would be a flat kind of amount. And so that whether you're level 1 or level 50, the amount needed to fill this bar stays the same. That is not precluding the possibility that we might down the road, as we get into higher and higher levels and have, some more critical mass moving through there, and certainly see what players are capable of doing and how quickly they're capable of filling that bar, we might change that paradigm up a little bit. But that is how it works currently. The third way to gain mastery points is through as a task reward or quest rewards. For certain quests, these are not every quest, but there would be certain quests, certain tasks that you would have that as a reward. And then the final way, the fourth way, is as a extremely rare world drop, meaning that any NPC in the game has a very, very small chance to drop a mastery shard. And once you've gathered 4 mastery shards, then you can combine those together into a mastery crystal that, once you consume that, will give you a point as well. And those shards can be traded, they can be sold.
Matt, you brought that up. That was going to be a follow-up question, because I know in the past you had said that was possible. So,
yep.
So maybe a very valuable item you could get your hands on and make some cash early in the game if you want to sacrifice giving it away, right? It's that kind of choice. Do I want to keep it? So that's awesome. Cool. So you have mentioned in the past that there will be 2 types of mastery pools. A player can invest in them, and kind of choose. So one of these is directly related to class abilities. And then there's sort of, and we haven't talked much about this, I don't want to get into it just yet, but that there's this base character mastery pool like that everybody will sort of have. So I'm excited to talk about both of these today, but can we start with the class abilities and what that'll look like? So before we go too deep, what's the goal with using mastery specifically for class abilities before we, again, I don't want to go too in depth yet.
So you want to
just with
class abilities or the general character mastery?
Like the general, no. Starting with class abilities, but like without going into detail on them, like what's the goal that we want to do with abilities and mastery?
Got it. So as I was saying in the beginning, this has a kind of a secondary progression, alternate advancement, alternate progression, secondary progression, the different ways of saying the same thing, that this is the joy in these games of getting higher level, getting more abilities, reaching that next tier where now, I'm getting these new abilities. That's huge. It's a very integral part of the joy and the satisfaction of the loop of these games. We want to take that a step further and say, okay, now that you have this ability, there are ways that you can progress these abilities even further by choosing to invest these mastery points in them. And the system is simple in the sense that it sits kind of as that just secondary progression layer, but it's also very deep and kind of vast, because every single ability in your arsenal has mastery upgrades available to it. Some of these, we'll get into some specific examples here in a bit, but you will see some mastery upgrades that are more kind of incremental improvement in nature. So it might be a mana cost reduction. It might be something like a damage bonus or a cooldown reduction, something like that. But then in most cases, the final mastery upgrade in the sequence, which is the most
Impactful.
potent one, impactful one, you'll see some pretty diverse results from that. Everything from well, I'll wait till we get into some examples. That probably be a better way to.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's a good segue. So the next thing I was going to ask you is, we've recently launched doing class refreshes, a lot of which has been based on community feedback, QA team feedback. And we're seeing a lot of positive things, as we kind of talked about as we did our Dire Lord one last week at our dev stream, and everyone can look forward to more of these. So the biggest thing with this is I know how much everybody loves class details. And as we're talking about class mastery, I thought maybe you could go in and give us maybe like one example per class about what this is going to look like. So you down for that? Can we go into like what a mastery run on an ability for a class would be for each one?
I sure can. Yeah, this is the good stuff, the exciting stuff.
Okay, so
what class are we gonna start with?
We're gonna go with Rogue first. I think just unbiased, we just pick Rogue. Is that fair?
Did you just draw that one out of a hat?
Just right out of a hat. There was no bias at all.
The hat that you're wearing.
Yeah, that's why I'm not wearing the hat. I had to put the glasses in it. Is that fair?
Got it. More than fair. All right, so we'll start with Rogue. So let's do backstab.
Wait. Let's do what?
Yeah.
Is this a bean?
That's a bean. It's a bean.
Did everybody write that down? Mark the video. Go ahead. I'm done talking. I'm gonna listen now.
So let's do backstab. Backstab, you'll see something like, your first mastery upgrade is going to increase the damage threshold of backstab. So your backstab is going to permanently do more damage with that first point. Second point of mastery is going to reduce the cooldown. So you're going to be able to backstab more often. The third mastery point is going to cause backstab when the target that you're backstabbing is vulnerable. Backstab will immediately refresh the cooldown on Blackjack Kick.
Okay.
So you have a good example here of full mastery opening up a synergy with a state that the NPC can be in, and then when taking advantage of that state, you're able to, as often as you can backstab, you're able to immediately refresh the cooldown on Blackjack Kick, which has a trickle down effect because of Blackjack's ability to generate opportunity points outside of stealth, and you instantly, kind of open up a nice little mechanic there to generate opportunity in active combat. So I like that one. I like the synergy of that one, and I like. I'm excited to get backstab back in there as a staple.
Yeah, and for those that are saying backstab's on the webpage, it's always been there. It was there. There was some class changes and some stuff we were playing around with. So those that aren't VIP testers probably didn't know, but kind of giving a little bean out here that backstab was kind of put on the shelf a little bit. And we we're trying some other things. So that's an exciting bean. That's why I didn't know. For those of you that don't know, we talked about this earlier today in our Discord, Joppa, is that I don't know the answers to the questions. I sort of like how we do this now. I kind of give you a flow and then I get to just react. So it's fun. Let's do Dire Lord next. How about that?
Okay. So for these, I've picked, something that I would consider kind of an iconic ability, or at least an important ability in the kit. So for Dire Lord, we'll do Provoking Phantoms. So the first point of mastery for Provoking Phantoms currently is going to reduce the cooldown of the ability, make it more available, and therefore, allow Dire Lords to have a little bit more freedom, and when they, are able to put that ability on something else. I'm going to give a few kind of tester beans here. I'm going to be talking to the testers a little bit because they know kind of where things have been, and so when I mention a particular change or adjustment, then it'll won't be lost on them. But one thing to expect, probably by next session, is that repeatedly casting Provoking Phantoms on the same target is not going to increase the stacks of Provoking Phantoms. And then along with that, auto attacks are not going to increase Provoking Phantom stacks. It's going to go back to being purely essence-based abilities that are going to increase those stacks, which will make some of these mastery upgrades important. The second point, or the second upgrade, I shouldn't say points because the point cost isn't
we'll get
the
into
same.
that.
But so first is going to reduce the cooldown. Second is going to increase the initial threat generated by Provoking Phantoms by a good amount. So it's going to allow it to function a little bit more in some cases as kind of a snap ability to snap taunt a little bit once you get that step. And then the final point in Provoking Phantoms is going to be what engages your auto attacks as a mechanism to increase the stacks.
Okay.
So we're sliding that out of the baseline functionality of the ability and putting that more as like a fully upgraded Provoking Phantoms. Leave it at that.
And just so we can clarify a little bit, when we talk about the ability, maybe let's kind of explain what it is in its base. But for Provoking Phantoms, it is a ranged ability for a Dire Lord that allows that target now to be marked, and it can only be on one target. And when that target is marked with Provoking Phantoms, specific abilities will increase the stacks of Provoking Phantoms on that target. And what that does is, as the stacks increase, any threat gaining abilities actually enable you to get a higher percentage of threat from those abilities per stack. So it's a way that what makes the Dire Lord very unique, and Jop, if I'm talking wrong here, just jump in, but is that Dire Lord may not be the greatest immediate threat. Now you can see with that mastery improvement, maybe that helps a lot, but it will be something where a Dire Lord is capable of really holding, like if they're on a single target for a while, they're going to really be able to be really strong at holding and generating threat over time. So it's kind of a differentiator in their tanking style, I believe. So, all right, Cleric, let's go into that.
Okay, so Cleric, I chose Ward on Death as our ability to look at. So Ward on Death is our the clerics. I say our. I am.
You are cleric. Hey, listen. If I'm allowed to claim rogue, you are obviously allowed to claim cleric.
Yeah. So Ward on Death and the Ward on Death line is our unique, strong, direct damage towards undead exclusively. And so what Mastery does is it is going to increase the damage that does. The first point of Mastery is going to increase the damage that it's doing overall. And then from there, it's going to introduce a snare component. So you'll be able to, through your Ward on Death line, you'll be able to actually slow the movement speed of the undead target. And then eventually it's going to put that target into a weakened state. And the reason that's important is because there could be, for example, certain ways that clerics themselves can capitalize on the weakened state, but it also further strengthens them toward undead in group situations, because now you've introduced a state that so many other classes in various ways can capitalize on. And so it provides some really interesting group utility and synergistic opportunities for Ward on Death besides just, nuking at the thing.
Cool. Awesome. Next up, let's go with Enchanter.
Okay. So for Enchanter, I picked Mesmerize. Surprise. So
I don't even think we have to even explain what Mesmerize is.
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
you did a good job, person. So why don't you give it a quick
Okay.
run?
So Mesmerize will basically stop a target in its tracks, just make it stand there, kind of hold it, crowd control it. So you can, if you get multiple pulls or you get multiple enemies or you need to break up a camp, you can take that enemy and just kind of put it on hold while you're fighting through enemies. For those of you that don't know, like old school style games, it might have had something like that. Good? That was okay?
Okay.
Okay, good.
That'll work nicely. All right, so for the Enchanter with Mesmerize, your first mastery point is going to reduce the mana cost. It's going to make that spell more efficient to cast, which is important for the Enchanter, especially in situations where they're having to maintain a lot of Mesmerize effects on multiple different mobs. The second upgrade is going to be an increased duration on your Mesmerize. So
Also very
in addition
important.
to very important, in addition to charisma being fundamentally part of increasing that duration, your charisma attribute now through mastery, you're going to be able to further increase that. And then the final update or the final upgrade, mastery upgrade to Mesmerize, is going to be a reduction in the mana upkeep cost. So there is a cost, a perpetual upkeep cost to Mesmerize, and that grows as you have more and more NPCs mesmerized. So if you just have one mesmerized, then it's a pretty negligible amount of mana. If you've got 3 or 4 all at once, then that upkeep cost is going to grow. So what this final mastery upgrade does is significantly reduce that drain amount to the degree that it may not, it may completely fall off
depending on the amount of targets.
With a single target mes, and then make it much easier to sustain for longer periods having multiple mes.
That's excellent. It's funny, I was looking at the list, I realized I left a class off, but don't worry, it's back. Shaman. How about Shaman?
All right, so Shaman, we'll look at their primary hot line. So this will be the Mantle line, Mantle of Mist. Your first mastery point is going to increase the amount of healing that it does. All of the healing events within Mantle, the initial heal, and then the subsequent ticks. The second thing it's going to do is it's going to give each. Actually, the first 2 mastery points are going to be kind of exponential increases in healing. So first one is going to some percentage of healing increase. Second one's going to be exponentially greater. So it's just going to be doing significantly more healing. The third mastery upgrade for the Mantle line is going to cause each of the ticks of healing to have a chance to proc Surging Power, which is a proc that makes your next spell instant cast.
Wow. That's a really good one, especially as a baseline hot, which they use quite frequently. It's a good one. Mm-hmm. Monk.
I wonder which ability people think about with
You're going to go there? You going there?
Well, where's there?
Do you just want me to mispronounce it? Is that what you're trying to do here?
I'm curious if you will.
I won't now. Feign Death?
Well, do you know what it is? Oh, yes, you're correct. Feign Death.
I sometimes say Feign Death, so people give me crap for that. There you go. Everybody in the chat needed me to make you laugh, and that was it. That's all I had to do.
So you don't actually say fiend, you just said that to try to make me laugh?
No, I probably do. I probably say that more than feign. But I knew I had to say feign.
Why not?
First.
Why wouldn't it be fiendeth?
Because I just use feign. I don't say the second part.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Two wrongs don't make a right.
Yeah. All right. So with Feign Death, so the first mastery point in Feign Death is going to reduce the cooldown on the ability, so enable you to use Feign Death more frequently, which is very important if you're in a situation where it's failed, or you're maybe you Feign Death and you didn't realize that the one caster mob was in the middle of spell casting, so you feign, it's successful, but boom, you get hit, and then now everything's back on you. It's going to reduce that cooldown, enable you to feign more frequently. The second mastery point is going to reduce the base chance, if you will, that a higher level NPC will see through the ruse once you stand back up. So I'll wait until we do the monk review to kind of go much deeper into the mechanics of Feign Death, but they are pretty robust. It's a pretty deep set of logic that's governing Feign Death, because it's an extremely powerful ability, and so it needs a lot of thoughtful logic going on in how it functions. I will though say, just as another being, that Feign Death in its full kind of implementation is going to be present in the next playtest as well. And it's a skill. It's a skill that you need to improve. It's a skill that takes a while to improve. It's a skill that fails a lot at first. Many of you will be familiar with kind of that feel. I'm really happy with kind of the place that we got it to. And then the final upgrade for Feign Death is actually allows you to rest, to be in a resting state while you're feigned.
Wow. I remember days in my past doing that with some health regen gear on. It was nice, so that's cool.
Mhm.
Very, very cool. That's huge for monks. I hope they like that. So that's it. That's it for classes. No, I'm kidding. I forgot to put Wizard on, so let's talk about Wizard. You imagine Wizard fans just lose their mind.
They would absolutely lose their mind. Yes, I don't doubt it. So, man, there's so many interesting ones that we could have done for Wizard, but
So
I decided
just
to
won't do
kinda-
any, just because it's just too hard to pick.
I decided because there's so many interesting ones to literally not say anything about any of them. I think that makes the most sense. For Wizard, I just went with Fireball. I think Fireball is and kind of the line of Firebolt spells is a nice and iconic one. And so your first mastery point is going to reduce the mana cost of that ability. Now that's important because of the way that the passive buffs towards specific schools of magic work for the wizard. So just to lay it out, and this won't be lost on our testers, but this is kind of a heads up at some upcoming tweaks to the wizard. So right now, every time you cast an ability of a specific school, you gain focus charges in that school based on the kind of ability it is. So if I use a fire bolt, that's going to give me 3 charges of fire focus. If I use a standard fire direct damage, it's going to give me 2 fire charges. If I use a fire instant cast nuke, it's going to give me 1. I can build up a total of 5 focus charges. And once I've built up those 5 focus charges, now every fire spell that I cast beyond that point is going to start stacking a buff related to that school. So the Fury of Flame buff will start to stack. And as you get stacks of Fury of Flame, again, this is using fire spells while I have full fire charge. Each stack of Fury of Flame is going to increase my fire spell damage. It's going to increase my chance to critically hit with fire spells. It's going to increase my spell casting speed, my haste with fire spells, but it's also going to increase the mana cost of fire spells. And that passive buff, that Fury of Flame buff, will stack up to 5 times, and at 5 stacks, you're going to be really putting out the burn, but it's going to be costing a lot of mana with each cast. And so this first mastery point is going to reduce the mana cost, not only for base fire spells, but also, once it's at that state of being at full stacks. The second mastery point is going to increase the burn damage from the dot that the firebolt line applies to the target. It's actually a pretty significant part of the DPS of that ability. And so increasing the burn damage of that dot substantially is a pretty significant buff. And then the final mastery upgrade is actually going to allow the fireball to knock targets down if they're in a off balance state. So it's going to unlock a synergy there for wizards with the firebolt spells to be able to do some additional forms of CC, because knockdown is technically a hard CC if the target is in an off balance state.
Awesome. Can we give a quick bean? The chat asked.
No.
No? All right. I'll just put it out there. Then you
Yes.
can tell them no. Mana Rohan in chat said, wait a second. Did you just say critically hit?
Yeah. Spell crits are a thing.
Yep.
Again.
Nice. Well, that was awesome. I really appreciate you taking us through some of those abilities. I think everybody got a little bit. It's a good thing we kept Wizard in, because that was a really good one. Like, if we didn't have that, good thing we put them back in. So the one thing I want to make sure everyone's aware that Parting the Veil is also very community driven. As always, we really respect our community. All of you have really made it, that passion project we're all a part of here, trying to get this game to launch. You guys all really provide a lot of support, not just in pledges, which you can check out on pantheonmmo.com, but the way that you interact on social media, the way you interact in our Discord, just the communication. It's always really helpful to us, and we're just really appreciative of that. But that's why we sort of created Parting the Veil. It wasn't just to talk about design docs. We want to highlight the community. So if you didn't know, we put out social media across every single one of our social media platforms, and we gather questions for every one of these shows that we do. So just keep an eye on that, because as we do the next show, you can submit your questions and we'll pick as many as we can to answer. So that was a big build up to say we're going to get into our first question here. And this is actually from Wolfians, who's actually in the chat right now. And this actually came up really last minute. And I was like, we need to add this in. This is a good one. So we're going to start with from Discord. Wolfians asked, will mastery be shared between abilities that are higher level versions of itself? And you kind of hinted at like the Bolt series and that. So what's your answer on that one?
The answer is yes. The answer is yes. So to give a little bit more insight into this, previously I had mentioned, since the refactoring, that Mastery has been a system that we hadn't brought back online yet. But prior to that refactoring, when Mastery was implemented, at that time we weren't supporting downranking of abilities, and downranking of abilities just means that if I have an ability line with multiple ranks or multiple versions of that ability, I can have as many of them on my bar as I want. That's downranking. So if I want my rank 1, 2, and 3 heal all on my bar because I just want to have all that access to them, that's downranking. We did not support downranking at that time. That was a decision that I had made that I've since changed my mind on. So at that time, when you got an upgrade, you actually upgraded the previous rank or form of the ability into the new one permanently. So you didn't have Fireball rank 1 through 5. You had Fireball rank 1, and then that upgraded into rank 2, but that's the only one that you had. There's good things about that. There's not great things about that. And I'm not a big fan of ranks. And so when I say ranks in Pantheon, you're going to be a little more creative than that, as far as like naming goes and things like that. But downranking is back. We do support that, and I think it does feed into the effectiveness of the limited action set system, because it's just that many more decisions that you make about what you want to put on your bar. But in bringing downranking back, we have now the question, I think a logical question of, if I'm assigning points into, Arctic Bolt that I get at level 30, what happens to Bolt of Titan Frost? That's my level 50 Cold Bolt. Do I have to also put points into that? Am I having to put points in all these individual abilities? And the answer is no. That spells that are part of a line will inherit the mastery points. All of them will inherit the mastery points that are invested in them. So at level 1, if I start putting points into my lowest level Cold Bolt, then every time I get a new version of that spell, it's going to inherit whatever mastery points I've invested.
That's awesome. That's really cool. All right, the next question here, I'm fired up on the screen. So this is from Reddit. This is from Stormfire FX. They ask, what degree of power, this is a tough question to answer, but if anyone can, I think you can. What degree of power can we expect to gain from the mastery system? Are we going to really feel it? Is it pretty impactful?
Yeah. It's going to be pretty impactful. Now, by design, the power is going to vary quite a bit. It's in the sense that a single ability being fully mastered isn't going to dramatically change things to a wild degree, but it's meant to be again an unlocking of your full potential. And so when you have, let's say you've gotten to the point where you've mastered all of your abilities, you've fully upgraded and mastered all of your abilities, absolutely there's going to be a substantial unfolding of not necessarily brute power. Like, you're not going to be all of a sudden one-shotting everything. That it's not that kind of power. Pantheon's all about a broader sense of unfolding, and so what you are, the kind of synergies, the kind of utilities, the kind of decision making and freedom and flexibilities that you're able to bring to any different combat situation is going to dramatically improve, as more and more of your abilities are mastered. Beyond that, yeah, in some cases, power for sure. I mean, a fully upgraded, Mantle of Mist, like we were talking about earlier, or Firebolt with their damage or their healing multipliers that are coming to play through mastery is definitely going to have an effect on your power. But it's meant to be less about like brute strength and brute power, but more really fleshing out the depths of your class and what you ultimately have the capability to do, the freedoms and the opportunities and the increased decision making and increased synergies and utilities that you're able to provide.
Great answer there. Last question before we jump in. Last question from the community here before we jump into some other things. But this one's actually from our official forums, and it's Counterflesh. So they said, will Mastery offer more than one improvement choice per ability? Will it limit other choices? Is there any kind of like branching or tree style, or is it going to be sort of 1, 2, 3 like we had sort of seen way back?
Yeah. So when originally designing the Mastery system, I wanted to stay away from specializations. I drew a lot of inspiration from the alternate advancement system of EverQuest. Also drew a good bit of inspiration from the talent system of the classic WoW era. And I think there's a nice kind of blend of the two a little bit in how our mastery system is going to work. But what I wanted to avoid was this sense of true specking, where I'm a fire wizard, I'm spec'd to be an ice wizard, I'm spec'd to be a shock wizard, that kind of thing. And I still feel that way. I still prefer and resonate more with classes being what they are. A cleric is a cleric, and the extent of what clerics are and what they can do is by right of being a cleric, not being this kind of cleric or this kind of cleric or this kind of cleric. However, I do think that there are some opportunities, and this is not this is a little bit of not a we can't talk about it yet, but more of this is something still under consideration. But there's been a few compelling thoughts and ideas put forward about how we can introduce some sense of decision making at certain points in the mastery system, and whether that's like Minus, I know you've suggested before that that final mastery point maybe is you've got the linear first one, second one, and then the final one you have maybe a choice of two. I think that's a compelling idea.
Don't tell people also, I have any say in design. I'm gonna get killed. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, having say in design is different than
yeah.
Throwing ideas.
Just I'm just kidding.
But yeah, you're good. But then also the idea that at certain points in your mastery progression that you would unlock, either as part of the general character mastery. Let's say once you've spent 30 mastery points in your class, then you're presented with an option. You're presented with kind of a separate choice and option that you have to pick. That in some ways might determine how things open up from there. And there's a couple more ideas, but I think at the bottom of it all, I want to make sure that the mastery system reinforces the identity, the kind of that pure identity of the classes, and really feels like a journey in unlocking that full potential. But I do think that there are some potential options as well to create decision points along the way that are meaningful. So more to come on that. But it's certainly in consideration.
Excellent. So let's get back to a base question here. So we've talked a lot about the character abilities and what that's going to look like. And I think that's a pretty juicy topic. And we've talked about it a little bit, but more in depth. We have not talked really almost at all about the other way we can spend mastery points. And that's really that character-based mastery point system. Doesn't necessarily tie into class. So I'm going to turn it over to you. This will be the first time we're really detailing this system. So if you could provide some examples, that'd be great. but sort of what types of things that players will be able to invest mastery points in.
Right. So I would say, first of all, that the class mastery is, the kind of the more principal kind of rock star version of the mastery system, because it's where you're getting into the nuts and bolts and the meat of like what you're capable of doing as your class, and that's the primary vehicle with which the game largely is experienced. But yes, the mastery system encompasses also kind of a general sense of mastery that relates to broader aspects of your character, not class in a class related sense. It's also feeds into the crafting and harvesting system as well, where mastery points can be spent there to further advance certain aspects of that sphere as well, which is something I'll let Neff talk about down the road. But the as far as general mastery goes, this is one of those places where lots of inspiration from like in EverQuest and things like that, where you've got pretty basic things like, what's my base run speed? Like, I want to improve my base run speed, so I have the opportunity to invest mastery there. I want to improve my I want to endurance exists as our adventuring resource, where endurance used to be a combat resource. Now it's devoted purely to adventuring, meaning that climbing, swimming, gliding, and sprinting all are governed by endurance. And so general mastery is a means where I can increase that base endurance pool. So instead of having 100 endurance at all times, I fully upgrade that mastery aspect of my character, and now I've got 200 as a base pool of endurance, for example. Things like how long you can hold your breath underwater, things like base resistances, like enabling through mastery kind of an increase in those base resistances, and the list goes on. But I think that those examples give and impart kind of a sense of what that general character mastery will allow you to do, which is just kind of filling out and improving and kind of those broader aspects of the character itself.
This is a great one. The chat just has. I'm going to throw out to you. How about fall damage? Can you put mastery so you don't take as much fall damage? Hey, with climbing, that could be a good one.
maybe. Yeah,
that's great. I love that comment. I feel like I need to give that person a shout out, because that's phenomenal. That was I'm going to pronounce it wrong, but Kunak. Oh, that was a good one. Next question from the community here is from our YouTube channel. Gulu Gulu asked, will different races of the same class have unique mastery?
Sorry, say that one more time.
Sure. Well, like basically, do races have any play on mastery abilities at all?
No plan for that at this point.
Okay. Next question here is from Reddit again, and this is great because Counterflesh is on here twice, but they did it right. They were on here once for the forums and once for Reddit, so I feel like that's the go around. If you have two good questions, you got to put them on different platforms. So Counterflesh asks, will all mastery upgrades take 1 point, or will there be different costs for the different mastery upgrades?
Gotcha. There will be different costs. So each of the three upgrades will require a larger amount of mastery points to unlock, and they have to be invested sequentially. So the first point has to be spent, and then the next unlock, and then finally the third one will be able to be unlocked. But the cost grows. So the first mastery point costs 1 mastery point. The first upgrade costs 1. The second one costs 2, and the third one costs 4. That's actually a nerf in mastery cost from what it was before, which was the first one was 1, the second one was 4, and the third one was 9. But like I said earlier, these numbers will be tweaked probably a few more times before we would say it's completely locked in, because it's an interesting balance where we don't want to necessarily end up in a situation like EverQuest did eventually, where you have this alternate advancement system and literally thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of alternate advancement points that you have to grind out, especially as a new character kind of thing, to get to the point where you're able to be competitive. So there's a recognition that we want players to want to make alts and want to play different characters, and so we don't want the grind of mastery. When you break it down, we don't want it to be so daunting that it's like I'd love to make an alt, but man. So that's one reason for the ability line decision by nesting mastery upgrades into the full line. But it also will play a role in how much the upgrades cost.
Excellent. That's an interesting thing you just brought up there. The next question I had for you was, what about resetting mastery? Is this going to be an option for players, like with a cost, or what's the option there?
Yes, you will be able to reset your mastery investment. It will cost money. It'll cost in-game money, and that cost will be
everybody just it'll cost money. Everyone just got.
It'll cost gold. It'll cost it'll cost pixels.
There you
go. But that cost will grow. That cost will grow each time that you do it, and so it's not something to do frivolously. In testing, though, the good news is for the testing environment, mastery resets will be free. There's actually a command. We'll probably incorporate it into the interface at some point, but as early as the next session, there'll be a command that will allow you to reset your mastery points, so we can get a lot of good testing in and try out different combinations.
That's incredible. That's really exciting. Okay, couple more questions here from the community. This next one is from our official forums from Fury Wrath. They said, and you kind of answered this, but let's just get specific. Plus, they asked the question, and I made the graphic, so we have to ask it. At what level is the earliest that we'll begin earning mastery?
You'll start earning mastery experience at level 1. So as soon as you kill the first thing, as soon as you complete the first quest, whatever happens first, you will start gaining mastery experience. So it'll be a companion system with you from level 1 and beyond.
Awesome. Next question here. This is our last community question. This is from Twitter. Mr. Cottleshire says, will you eventually be able to spend mastery on everything, not including maybe crafting things that you didn't select to be a pro to take?
Yes. The intention behind the system, again, going back to that theme of unlocking your full potential and ultimately realizing your full potential, has always been about eventually fully achieving that state. So yes, eventually, with enough time, you'll be able to master everything. The exception to that being, again, the potential for creating some opportunities for some decision making and things like that along the way. But fundamentally, yes.
Excellent. Then last question from me, and you sort of answered this, but let's just wrap up with it before we get into final thoughts. So my question for you was, when did you expect mastery to be back into the testing sessions for our testers? But you've sort of talked about that with this upcoming test, we do expect it to be in there.
Mm-hmm. I don't just expect it; it's in.
Cool.
Now, the thing to the expectation setting is more. It's not going to be that every class has their full, mastery upgrade path for every single ability ready to go, by the next test. But my goal is to make sure that as many abilities as we can get in would have their mastery paths available, so that as by next session, testers will be able to start digging in.
That's awesome. So, Chris, we covered a lot. Chat, awesome. It seems like everybody's pretty excited. This is a topic that I know you were really passionate about, and myself as well. Before we wrap up tonight, is there anything that we just really haven't talked about, or just any final sentiment or statements you'd like to make about the mastery system?
No, I believe it's a very important system for Pantheon. I'm excited to see it in, because I think it's going to just be another layer of unlocking, how we're really committed to and pursuing a depth of character progression, and so it's something that I'm personally really excited about. That I personally have been eager to get back in action. So, Yeah, I don't have any final thoughts. I'm curious what kind of questions and discussions maybe this session will spark. I hope everything was relatively clear. But yeah, I felt pretty solid.
Awesome. Well, as always, thank you for joining us in the community and answering some community questions here tonight on Parting the Veil. We'll see everybody again next month, and we will have our producer's letter coming out next week. So make sure to check back on pantheonmmo.com for that. Other than that, everybody, have a wonderful night. And Japa, once again, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you all so much. Onward and upward.